Hi to you cousins, it's old Rusty here. I hope you're doing fine out there. I'm doing all right. But this video, folks, for you today is about identification of ivory. Maybe you have a piece of jewelry, maybe you inherited something and you think, I wonder if this is ivory. I wonder if I can sell this, or is it illegal? I'm going to cover all that today. I'm going to give you several examples of things that are ivory, things that are not, but are close enough that they can sometimes fool people. Things like bone, antler, mother of pearl, and synthetic items like plastics and resins. Well, let's get into it here, folks. I'm going to give you a few tips so that you'll have a better chance of identifying something, and then I can advise you on selling versus can you sell it or not. Let's get into it.
Rusty's Hot Tips.
I have a variety of items laying out here for you folks to take a look at. And we're going to go through what are these items, what are they made out of, and how do you know if it's something that you can sell or can't? Well, I've put a bunch of things out here that are all sort of similar in look. Some of these items are ivory, some of these items are bone, some of these items are things like lucite, and some of them are made out of just other types of antler or horn. Let's get right into it here, folks. The big differences between ivory and things like bone or antler is the way that they form, the way that they grow. There are some telltale signs on something that is lucite. For example, this. This is something that is not ivory, right here. We're going to look up close at that in a moment. This is something that is actually made out of bone. So we've got a bone item here. We have something made out of plastic, a synthetic resin. And then we have some items here that are in fact made out of ivory. For example, this pair of earrings. These are clip-on earrings. You can see they're older. They might even have, I'm trying to see if it says on here or not. It says 925. No, it says Japan. So these were made in Japan. So let's take a close look at these. The first thing I want to tell you about ivory is that it always comes in this kind of soft white to cream color. So the color is one indication that it could be made out of ivory. But as you can see, other things can take on that same color. I'm using these as my first example today because they give the best presentation of one thing that you should really look for. Now, these are made to be kind of soft and slick the way that they've been carved or ground down. But oftentimes with things like ivory, one of the ways you can pick it out is that they might be scratched or carved on. And on the back here, you can kind of see these lines, and these lines are where it's been actually carved out by some sort of a carving tool. So a lot of times, the stuff you're going to see has been carved. If it hasn't been carved, or you can't tell that it's been carved, even with looking with like a jeweler's loupe, that's one indication that it's not. This is very slick. If you look with a loupe, there are no lines, there are no variations, and it's lighter weight as well. And that's one way I can tell that that piece is not made out of substance like ivory. Ivory, as you can see, has this very interesting pattern here. Do you see these kind of lines on here? Not just lines, but like a cross-hatched pattern. Cross-hatching is something that artists do sometimes in the way that they sketch things. It's where you put lines diagonal to one another. Let me get out an ink pen and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Now that I got my ink pen out here, I'm going to show you what a crosshatch looks like. If you were to run some lines like this right next to each other, one direction, as you can see, and then if I were to do it this other direction, like this, do you see how these lines all line up like this? That's what you're looking for. Now, as I pan over from here to this piece, do you see what I'm talking about? Do you see how this is just the way that ivory forms? you've got lines running one direction and then another. You can see it right next to that, exactly what I'm talking about. And on the back, you can also see it. Do you see that right there? That is the main way that I can tell that something is ivory, is by this crosshatch pattern. Now let's take this, for example, and you can see it up close. And then let's swap out for this piece right here. This, same color tones. You can see close up as I rotate it with the gloss from the light that this has also been carved. But what you're not seeing here, folks, no matter which angle that I turn it, you're not seeing that crosshatch. What you are seeing, however, are these tiny little pits, these little tiny brown spots. Do you see these little brown spots by my thumbnail here? What that is, folks, is that's showing that this substance has run, it's basically formed with tubes that are at different spots hollow, because bone, of course, is hollow. That's part of the way that bone forms, is that these hollow tubes and, white blood cells and things are grown or formed in here. Over time, with use and handling, these little pits and open areas will turn dark because they collect things like dust, or if they're handled by hands, they can collect skin or just other things from the environment. And with moisture, that will turn brown and it will turn different colors. So if I'm looking at something and you have these little pits, these little open holes in different spots, then what you're looking at, folks, is bone. Here, I'm going to show you a beautiful sword. This is a katana. It's an Asian piece that is made not really to be used a whole lot, really more for ceremonial purposes or just for looks, for display. What you've got here is that the handle and the sheath or the scabbard here of this entire sword is adorned with carved images of people and places. It's very beautiful. But if you take a very close look, you're going to see what I just described. Do you see all these little holes, all these little pits, all through here? And this is an old piece, early 1900s. But I can tell right away by this pitting all over it that we're looking at bone here, folks. We're not looking at ivory. And thank goodness, because I would have a very difficult time, if I was even allowed at all, to sell this piece if it were made out of ivory. And so again, look at the difference in the way that this looks versus that. You see no holes, no pits, no dark brown or anything that's formed on that. But you do have it here. Let me show you. This pulls out to reveal a blade on the inside. It's a little bit rusted, but it's definitely a cool piece. All right, again, we're using this piece right here as our reference point. You see that cross-hatching. Let's look at some other items and see if we can identify things that look similar. Put that down. Here's another pair of earrings, same style, just smaller. As I get closer, look at that cross-hatched pattern there. Now, I will note that depending on the angle that you look at it, the way that it has been formed, sometimes it's difficult to see that. You have to rotate items in several different directions in order to see what I'm talking about. Here's another pair of earrings that have some gold bands on it. But again, if you look up close, you can see how that crosshatch pattern is in there. And you can see that that's marked in the back 14K as well, because these little gold bands are in fact made out of gold. Here's another pair of earrings, and you can kind of see those lines. From this angle, it looks more like lines, but if you start to rotate it around the edge, all right, there you can see that is in fact made out of ivory. Here's a little piece that I think is made for fishing purposes, or possibly something else. I can't exactly remember. But do you see how, when we look up close, certainly it is carved. But do you see the little dark holes and the little pits? Well, folks, what we're looking at here is bone. Again, setting that next to these, you can see the difference. Moving on, we got this beautiful beaded necklace. But if you get close enough and you zoom in, look at those beads. You see that? So we're looking at ivory beads What about the pendant? Or the piece here at the edge? What do we got here? Let's flip her over and pull it up close and look. Well, we got someone's name here, the artist who made it. Can't quite tell from this angle. It's glossy. You can kind of see the lines. You can see that it's carved. But as I start to rotate, all right, now right here, do you see? Actually, let me put this here by my hand so I can zoom in good. When we get to the edge, now you can kind of start seeing that cross-hatched pattern in there. Yeah, right here on the edge. Do you see that? Those lines? So this entire piece is, in fact, made out of ivory. Here we've got an old little pendant carved out quite intricately of some sort of a pagoda or a hut of some kind. If you flip it over and you start to look and examine, we want to look real close. Yes, it looks like it's carved. Let's rotate around. Oh, now we're to the edge. Carved again. Carved. This one's harder to tell because of the surface. It's carved. But see, at this angle, you can see those lines. See those lines, how they're formed? You're not fully seeing the crosshatch, but it's because you're not looking at the angle that is required to see that perfectly. But this is made of ivory as well. Here's a lovely little necklace. Again, a beaded necklace, much smaller than the one we looked at a moment ago. You can see these beads. When you zoom in really close, it's kind of difficult to tell what it is. It's such a darker cream color. And again, it's based on the direction that you look at the beads, whether or not you can tell. So far, it's a little difficult to see. But let's move on to the pendant itself. Well, you can kind of see that it's carved, obviously, and etched. If you look really close at it, you can see the lines. And if I rotate it, or if I turn around to the back, you can see on either side, the left and the right, these striations, these lines. That's an indication that this could be ivory. If let's keep rotating and to the bottom and then say, okay, there we go. There's the crosshatch look. Do you see that? Those lines running both ways, like what I did over here, just like that. There's the hatch, just like the original pair of earrings we looked at. Let's look at a few items, again, that are not, so that we can tell the difference. So we've got our ivory things here. Here's a piece of sterling silver jewelry that incorporates some semi-precious gemstones like peridot and topaz, and then this beautifully carved woman here with vegetation in her hair and various stuff going on here. Definitely got the color right. We got some mother of pearl here at the bottom that's kind of that iridescent. Flip it over. Take a look here. All right. We get close. We can see that it's carved, but I'm not seeing any lines. Doesn't matter what direction I'm looking at. I'm seeing no lines, but I am seeing that pitting with a little bit of the dark grooves. So to me, this is a telltale sign that what we're looking at is bone. Carved bone. Next up, we've got this. Again, we've got some carnelian in here, sterling silver setting as a pendant, or could be worn as a brooch. You can see that the mark there for 925. Down here again, we're looking, this has clearly been stained to give it a certain type of a look. But again, we've got carved all those little holes. We're looking at bone there. Right here, turn every direction we can. No lines, no striations, no cross-hatching. We're looking at bone. Now I've got here a case knife from a set of 7 or 8 different pocket knives, all from a 1977 set. Beautiful knife, an etched blade. But we're not looking at the blade or the knife. We're really wanting to just look at the handle. And what do we have here? Well, it's slick, it's definitely carved, and definitely stained. But again, we've got these lines, these little, or not, no lines, rather these holes, these pits. And so what we're looking at here, folks, this is either bone or antler, coming from like the antlers of a deer or something like that, but not made out of ivory. Switch over to an antique item here. This is an antique napkin ring set with this base so that it could stand up like this. And it's sterling silver as well. Beautiful little piece. And we got this ring. What's going on with this ring? Well, let's take a look. On the top, we can't really tell. It's somewhat smooth. We got some dark areas. Can't quite tell yet, but when you zoom in, all right, there you can see. Do you see that crosshatch pattern? Crosshatchings? All right, there. This, folks, is made out of ivory. Now let's look at a couple of pieces that I really love showing and talking about. This is something called netsuke. And netsuke is referred to these figurines that were made in Asia. And from my understanding, the dress that they used to have was like these like robe type situations, and they didn't have pockets in these things. They had like a little waist belt that they'd tie around, but they needed a way to carry things around. So they had this another piece of fabric that on one end would be tied to, say, a pouch, almost like a little purse or something they could hold stuff in. And then they needed something tied onto the other end to act as a counterweight to hold it. And that's where these come in. These were made to be tied onto the end of the other piece of fabric, and they would make various types of figurines. The way you know a lot of times is that they have these two little holes on either side. This one has them there. This one has them right here, these two holes. And that's what the loop of leather or whatever it was would go through and tie these on. Both of these pieces are expertly carved, beautiful, etched. This is like a little man sitting in almost like a little boat type of a situation. And he's got these loops, but if we start to inspect very closely at his arms underneath, when we rotate, we're looking to see, is this made out of ivory? From this angle now, you can see his arms. There is that cross-hatched pattern in the arms, and on the top of the back of the boat, you can see. This is, in fact, made out of ivory. Here is one of a couple of men. They're sitting on top of, looks like a koi fish, and they're holding on to one another with like this rope. Two gentlemen, beautiful piece. Again, let's look around. Well, right here on his shoulder, you can see those lines, those crossed-hatched lines. Also on this side, and this gentleman, you can see it too. But again, you have to rotate because just on the face of the fish, you can't necessarily see it. You have to look down a particular direction, and then that's where it sort of pops up and you can tell. As a contrast, here's another piece that's made as a pendant. You can see at the top it had a loop at one time is missing. But if I rotate around, and at the bottom I can see it's definitely carved, but there's pitting. There's no lines, but there is that pitting. So folks, what you're looking at here is a piece of bone. Let's go to another figurine. Here's a man holding some sort of like accordion situation. As I zoom in on him and I start looking around, I see, okay, perhaps some lines there. What direction do I need to look at to get this to expose itself? Here on the bottom, you can see it's carved. It's scratched and carved, but he's also got a various type of dye or a color that kind of masks what the outside looks like. So this is a little bit more of a difficult piece to tell. But over here, I start to see these striations, those lines. And so then if I turn and I look at a certain angle, it's difficult to see, but this is in fact also a piece. You can see the lines kind of toward the right there. This is a piece of ivory. So we have ivory here, ivory. This one's a little darker. This one's made out of bone. And then a couple other pieces. This is a pretty like necklace here. And it has these cloisonne beads, which is another Asian motif that you often see in jewelry. Sterling silver end caps. Just looking at one side of this little long piece here, you can't quite tell, but if I rotate to the edge, you see the crosshatch there now. On the inside, you see the striations, the lines, but as you turn to one side. So this, in fact, is also a necklace made out of ivory. And here also is a carved bangle bracelet. From one side, looks just like carved. But when you look on the inside, then you see that these lines start to form. And on the edge here, you can see how the lines come, and there's that crosshatch look again. This is a piece of ivory. One last bit of set of earrings here. These are some antique earrings, some screw back earrings. They're carved to look like flowers with little leaves. They're hand painted. They just look like plastic costume jewelry. But if you flip them over, you'll see that there's this metal screw back earring. These are made out of sterling silver, and on the back of the item itself, if you zoom in, there you can see those lines. So this is in fact ivory as well. So down here below, we have ivory figurines, necklaces, bangle bracelets, necklaces with beads and pendants, carved brooches, rings, earrings, other carved figurines. And all of these are made out of ivory. In contrast, you've got bone pieces, and then this sword again that incorporates carved bone. Again, the big difference is the way that they are carved, the way that they look. Do you have lines and dark holes and pitting? That's bone. Do you have cross-hatched lines or striations in your piece of jewelry? If you look very close, like at the neck and head here, if I rotate here around, now it really starts to emerge, and you can see the color differences. Just be aware, folks, that ivory is something that is illegal to sell in the United States. There are very strict laws that forbid you to sell that kind of item unless you can prove with documentation that it was produced and imported to the United States prior to 1900. If you have documentation that can show that, then you may be likely to sell that. However, certain platforms like eBay do not allow the sale of ivory under any circumstance. Most auction houses and estate sale places will also not sell them unless you have that documentation. Just make sure that you are following whatever laws there are that are surrounding that so you don't get yourself into trouble. But I hope that helps. There's all kinds of cool stuff. All this stuff I showed you is in my personal collection. I didn't buy them individually. They just came in lots of jewelry and stuff that I've bought and sold over the years. I think it's cool. The history is really neat. But use these tips when you're looking so that you can identify what you have. Good luck treasure hunting, folks. We'll see you soon. Let's go find some treasures. Rusty